Welcome to the Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. My guest for this series is Paula Krebs. She's the executive director of the Modern Language Association, which offers professional development resources and advocacy for the advancement of the study and teaching of language and literature. Among those resources are, of course, the MLA Handbook, recently published in a significantly expanded 9th edition, and the MLA's International Bibliography, a database of more than 2.8 million records of scholarly resources in the modern languages and literature, and which is celebrating its 100th anniversary. I've been speaking with Paula about the handbook and the bibliography, what's new with both of them, and how they're uniquely adaptable as resources for information literacy. Speaking of InfoLit, the MLA also publishes the MLA Guide to Digital Literacy. We spoke with that book's author, Ellen Carrillo, back in January 2020. You can listen to that conversation in episodes 106 through 109. Also in this 4-part series, which is sponsored by the MLA, Paula and I dive into the state of humanities scholarship and discuss how recent events have highlighted its importance. In this final episode of our 4-part series, we discuss how the MLA is addressing issues in social and racial justice in ways that reinvigorate the humanities in higher education. Paula also vigorously explains why she's tired of the rhetoric of crisis concerning the humanities. Kind of sticking with that, I'm wondering if we can kind of pull this into an MLA context. As you know, human rights, equity, inclusion, and social and racial justice in general are front of mind for so many right now. Mm-hmm. So, I'm wondering how is the MLA addressing these issues in ways that help reinvigorate the humanities in higher ed?
Yeah, now these are the issues that are driving much of humanities research these days. And we're seeing that in what we publish in our various publications, in our books, in PMLA, and, in the bibliography, what we index, and what our members are presenting at the convention. That's kind of the first place where we see these kinds of movements. Our community platform, the MLA Commons online platform, we in the summer gathered and shared tons of resources on anti-racist pedagogy. In our newsletter last summer, we had a really important piece by Jennifer Ho on anti-Asian violence and anti-racism pedagogy. I mean, our members are engaged with these issues every day in their teaching and their research, and they're bringing them to us as a place to share, all of the forms in which we can share our, again, publications, convenings of various sorts, webinars we've had. We're seeing our members engage with this stuff. And what's fascinating to me is that it goes completely across disciplines, historical periods, geographic areas, that these issues are everywhere, that there's not one area of language and literature, cultural studies, writing studies, education that doesn't recognize that it's been behind. It's been behind in addressing these things, and it can do it now. And we are.
Good. Excellent. In a previous series, on this podcast, we recently spoke with Greg Yao, who's the president of the Center for Research Libraries, and I'm taking this a little bit out of context, but and one of the things he said, and I'm paraphrasing this, is that for basically as long as he's been in the humanities have been in crisis. And that means the humanities aren't really in a crisis, but that their difficulties are more structural or a state of being. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that and what opportunities or challenges does changing the frame like that offer?
I get like Greg, I guess I get really tired of the rhetoric of crisis around the humanities. Yeah. I feel like the humanities are the framework themselves. The humanities are the framework through which we examine and we critique and we try to change the culture. The culture is what's in crisis. The overall culture is in crisis. The humanities are the framework that can help us understand that crisis and change that crisis. Funding for humanities education is lower than it should be. And that's critical. But that's a crisis for higher education, not a crisis for the humanities.
Yeah.
Humanities are fine. Humanities are robust. Humanities researchers, they're writing about the pandemic. They're helping us understand it. They're writing about white supremacy, about immigration, about disability. I mean, they are engaging deeply and publicly, and sharing, their work publicly. They're not in crisis. The humanities, training in the humanities is what enables us to read texts and cultural forms that let us make sense of our world. And humanities teachers are the ones who are helping students know the difference between truth and what word can I fudge? Let's say fudge.
I thought you were going for something different there.
I was going for. So I was, and I thought I
keeping
better
it
not.
PG, I guess. Yeah.
So I think that I think. I mean, there's a public relations issue, and we need to be more vocal about how important it is to have information literacy, to have the humanities train us to know the difference between truth and falsehood, to give students the tools to not accept things at face value, to not accept everything they see in social media as truth, but here's the thing. Students love the humanities. They love them. They love art. They love literature. They even love philosophy when you put it in front of them and they engage with it. They love history. The problem is the parents who tell their offspring to major in a field that's named after a job. Or the state legislator, who wants to raise tuition rates for students who major in humanities. How about that? Or people like, Rick Perry back in the day, who wanted people to be welders instead of philosophers, or to be bipartisan Barack Obama, who mocked art history majors. I mean, it's a public relations issue, but we didn't create it. Nevertheless, we have to fight it. I understand that. I just don't want us to be on the defensive all the time, because I feel like, the humanities, I mean, the crisis is that of a culture that fails to value the humanities. The crisis is not the humanities.
Yeah, nicely said. All right, Paula, that's all we have time for. So thank you so much for joining us on the program.
That's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
You just heard from Paula Krebs. Paula is the Executive Director of the Modern Language Association. The MLA is the sponsor of this series. If you like what you hear, rate us or give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced by Choice's senior digital media producer, Mark Dirks, and digital media assistant, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.